Hi, my name is Michael Trout. I'm the CEO, founder of FOUNDUPS. I'm a serial innovator. And I want to explain to you what this data means to an innovator. When I look at this, I go, wow, this fits with innovation. And I'll explain it. Now, there's some specific milestones. Let me explain this graph here. This is basically number of producing colonies, right, in the millions, right, in the United States. And understand, the United States has a pretty substantial honey production market. Mainly all small. They're not big companies, not like Monsanto's kind of think of the Bayer or these other ones. These are kind of family-owned businesses and everything else. They don't have a lot of clout and everything else. But basically in 1940s to 45 after the war, basically the production jumped up. Getting into bees is cheap. Bees do all the work. I mean, the industry, the methods hasn't changed in really 100 years. Okay, they still use the same technology and everything else. And bees are representative. Over 150 billion euros of food. That equates to about 250 billion dollars. Some say that the pollination market is up to $2 trillion, right? So we're talking about a massive market if pollinators die. Now understand too that this is recording what's known as social bees, the honeybees. All right. So we're actively replenishing these colonies using our technology, you have to imagine what's happening to the majority of bees, which are what's known as solitary bees, and other bees, which represent that they pollinate 70% of the food. 1 out of 3 bites is food from these bees, not just honeybees. There's over 20 to 30,000 different species, and honeybees make up a small amount. So you've got to, when you look at this graph, you got to think of the bigger picture that if these bees are going down like this, right? And I've added this here because we know we've had a 30% decline starting in 2000 with colony collapse. The EPA didn't put the data, so I did the 30% decline right here. It's crashing. And notice it crashed here too, and I'll explain to you what's going on here. So basically, I want to, this data, it's pretty obvious if you look at history what went on here. Carter passed some very strong, the most stringent pesticide regulation in the history of America happened right here. It's never existed ever since. And look, the bees started to recover. They started to go up a little bit, right? Um, Reagan took office. He pretty much dismantled. There's plenty of evidence. You can actually, read the book on politics and pesticides. And he basically ushered in a whole new era. And as a result of his, policy, and also at this stage we created the lobbyists became very powerful at this point, right? Pesticide companies became free reign, and the whole environmental movement was basically killed, destroyed by the Reagan policy. Um, the other thing that happened here, okay, is that systemic pesticides, which were developed around here, and you notice how it flattened out. It was growing, going. There was a lot of money going in. This is when Japan crashed in the 1990s, right? So, and as a result, it affect our financial markets, and you see it tapered off a little bit here, right? That's because of, I would guess, because of the global, because what Japan effect of Japan, if Japan hadn't collapsed, we would have been here, and it would have been a super crash. But I'm interpreting this. This is where Japan actually collapsed. So these systemic pesticides, which were developed in the 1990s, late 1990s, I think they hit the market in 1995, and then in 2000 they started selling. Now these were very expensive; not a lot of people could afford them. Well, in the course of 10 years, the technology has improved, the cost has gone down, and also the adoption has gone up. So let me show you what this means to me. Right now, there is, if this will, oh, okay, it's not going to go. All right, so this is something called the end of growth, right? And this has been predicted in 1970. What we're happening now is there's going to be a massive collapse, and I believe that the bee is a part of the what we call canary system warning us. We are right here. Let me show you. And I'm going to continue this talk in the next talk here, okay? Okay, this is part 2 of probably a three-part talk, maybe four, and about the end of bees. Now, I want to tie this to something that's very important, which is what I'm calling the collapse of growth. A lot of people call it the end of growth. Some people call it the limits to growth. But if you look at this graph here, it's collapse. Collapse of resources, collapse of services per capita, collapse of food per capita, collapse of, population. It's a collapse. It's not an end, it's a collapse. So notice we are right here. We are basically right at the beginning of the collapse, right? It's right here. We're going to have another 5, I'm guessing, I thought this was going to happen a lot later, to be honest with you. I wasn't aware of this data until last month, and it's changed my life completely. It's changed my paradigm, and I hope that it will change yours, because understand that this data has been around since 1970, and all of the modeling, this is all done. And understand that these curves are all exponential. Now, it's very important that you understand the exponential function, and you can. It's simple, simple math. So anytime someone says, oh, I have a 3% growth or a 2% or even a 1.5% growth, right, then ultimately that cannot be maintained scientifically, mathematically, in a finite resource environment. Bees are a finite resource. They're non-renewable, okay? Once they're gone, they're gone. Once we kill all the bees, they go extinct. There's no way. The dinosaurs are extinct. There's no way. So it's very important that, and I believe that in many respects, the crash of the bees fits right in. It's an alert. It's a canary, right? That's the Japanese actually used it as a canary for our system. Wake up, people. It is here, right? This is part of it. You lose bees, obviously per capita food production is going to go down, right? Here's the loss of bees, right here. Are you going to be able to pollinate $2 trillion worth of food globally by hand? No. People are going to starve. Look at all of a sudden deaths go up, right? This all ties in. So this is very important, because this is the big picture and why the bee situation is so dire, because it fits in with this collapse of growth. Now, I want to talk about this chart here, right? So let me talk about, I just screwed up something because I did something. So what I want to show you here is something what's known as the technology adoption cycle. It's based on something called the law of diffusion of innovation. And basically this is really important, because this graph here basically is a representation of this EPA data, right? I'm a serial innovator. The moment I saw it, I go, boom, here is data that fits right along this graph, and it actually shows you where the different parts come in. So right here would be the innovative stage of pesticides, or developing them, right? But basically they don't exist yet, right? So there's a massive boom because beekeeping is really cheap. Right here is the 1950s. We had the Korean War, the Vietnam War, right? Pesticides basically were used in chemical warfare. DDT, remember that stuff? Well, we were using that up till I think the 70s or 60s, right, as a pesticide. And it showed in our bee populations. And right here is what I would say is where the early majority in diffusion happened, because what happened was markets grew up, pesticide laws were destroyed, everyone else followed that, and ultimately there was massive decline in bees and insects. And as I mentioned, this is just honeybees that we have data on. We don't have bees on the 20,000 plus solitary bees that don't sting you, that are very important, that are also being devastated. And we already know that certain bumblebees have gone extinct, right? 2 bumblebee types in England have gone extinct. God knows how many others. We know folks like Monsanto is bribing to get into Indonesia and other places in order to to basically own crops. And if I was to kind of talk about this here, look at this here. I've reversed it, because basically what I wanted to show you is the red is the bee crash that we're going on right now, that you can read this. Here is the innovation, early adoption. Reagan policy helped later on, and I'll continue next. So let me just go back and just quickly review. So here is data from the EPA on losses of bees starting from 1940s. Actually, the chart had 1945, 1945, so I think that was a typo. So I actually put it to 1940. So I'm not sure when in 1940 their data started, but it didn't seem weird that it grew that much in 1 year, but maybe it did. That was the only change. I also added this 2012 because it wasn't on their data, and I'm speculating that bee populations have crashed by 30% during that time. And that's the figure that we had. It may be more than that. I doubt it's less. So what I did was show and explain what's known as the technology adoption cycle, which is very important because it's how everything, if you look at Wikipedia, you look at everything, everything grows using this cycle. I also showed basically where each stage, the innovation stage, the early adapter stage, and actually the early majority stage happened. And now we're actually getting into the late majority stage, okay? I was basically explaining the different parts. So if you think of innovation of pesticides started in the 40s and 50s, early adaptation, we had the agri-boom, the bread basket, everything in the 50s just going crazy with growth. We then had you notice there's a gap here because right here in our data, the bees go up, which the EPA doesn't explain. But it's funny, the bees go up and then they crash. But the only thing that's common here is we had Carter passing the most stringent pesticide restriction laws ever in the history of humanity, right? We've never seen anything like it. And what we need to do is look for countries which have very strong pesticide laws, and I bet we'll find that their bee populations are fine. Or what we do is run a trial. If you have a state or something else, just ban pesticides for 5 years, okay? Just, make an auditorium on them and see what happens to the beekeepers and everything else. And I guarantee that your bees are going to recover, right? Late majority, basically systemic pesticides and laggards. I kind of put it together here. These systemic pesticides are super pesticides. They're super drugs, and they were very expensive. They're developed just in the late 90s. The seed treatment, which Monsanto is the one that basically innovated, that's why they're getting a lot of flack. It's systemic pesticides in seeds. Basically, you don't have to do anything. You just plant the seed. It has the pesticide in it, and anything that eats it or takes pollen or anything is screwed. They die. And their cost, obviously, in 10 years have gone down. Now they're getting worldwide penetration, and they've had great results. It kills, it exterminates, it destroys anything eating it, including the beneficial bees. So the pollinators that we need are being devastated by this, this technology. What's happening now is there's a bee crash. So what I want to show you is I'm going to kind of invert this to kind of show you this that is kind of similar. So if you don't see the graph here, I'm going to try to show it to you. So here I've flipped the graph upside down, right? And to try to show you, so if I was to show you this here, all right, here is the innovation stage of pesticides, which would correlate here, right? Here is the early adapter, which would correlate here, United States market, right? And I've actually put it over the hump, which means the speed. And there's a lot of other things going on here. You got to look at what's going on. This is the boom in Japan and others. There's a lot of money going into pesticides. And then this is where we are now with the crash, and it correlates here. The pesticide market is pretty much penetrate the United States. When there's a new product that becomes affordable, boom, it goes everywhere. We are in the in the what's known as the late late majority. The laggards, these guys here in the blue, these are, who do you think these are? These are the folks who are the anti-pesticide users. These guys will not use the organic food folks right here. So where is the organic food right now? Organic foods right now is at the they've crossed the innovation. They're in the early adoption stage. Okay, they've probably crossed the chasm, right? It took a long time for organic foods. They're not in the early majority yet. They're not in late majority, but that's where we need to get them. And if we can get them, we can save the bees. So I want to conclude here by being proactive. I'm an innovator. Innovators basically bring about solutions to big challenges. And if you know anything about me, I've innovated a solution to change the startup. In 2001, I started trying to innovate a solution to change global education. And now I'm providing you a solution on how to help the bees. The good news is we know that if we can bring about political change, we can do that. Now, recently, there was a group that did just that. Now, I don't believe in everything that they were doing, right? And that group ultimately is Coney 2012. I don't believe doing witch hunts is proactive because ultimately people can abuse witch hunts, which is what we saw, right? We did a witch hunt for this guy, and people took advantage of that witch hunt in order to, potentially take, advantage of oil assets and other things. We're not talking about a witch hunt here, guys. We're talking about using the same framework, which I call going Coney 2012 for something, right? Going 2012 for it. That's what a framework that I've developed, and the framework is really simple. All right, I looked at Coney 2012. I said, what are the problems with Coney 2012? Well, number one, there's an organization. Well, number one, we're headless. There is no entity behind Save Our Bees. There's no one getting the money behind Save Our Bees. It's up to you, small groups, grassroots initiatives, us working together. The thing is, I have a master's in nonprofit administration management. You don't need nonprofits anymore. Ultimately, they're dinosaurs. We can bring about the action we need using this new kind of viral framework, which I do have to give credit to. Coney 2012 proved. So what is this framework? Well, the first thing you do, right, is we got to set up town halls. How do we set up town halls? Is you launch a group on Facebook. A group, not a like page, a group, because you can actually conscript your best friends to it. You can conscript all your friends to it, but understand 16.5% are going to be annoyed because they're laggards and they'll never see a problem even if you put it in front of them. So they're going to bitch about it. So depends on how you can handle it in different ways. You can just bring your friends. You can bring everyone. I bring everyone, right? My attitude is if you don't see this as a problem, you can always drop me as a friend, right? Number two is get a petition going. I've got Japan's going. We need 193 petitions. Every country in the United Nations needs to be petitioned, right? UN countries. I don't think there's a pesticide problem in North Korea. I don't think in a lot of these other countries. I don't think they have the money. I don't think they're going to have a bee population. I could be wrong. So if you want to go, and don't get offended because I said 193, there's a lot of different numbers. I just picked the UN numbers. Vote with your mouth. Stop buying pesticide-treated food, okay? Now, I don't have much of a choice in Japan because all food here is probably treated with pesticides. But ultimately, you have organic, and that is our strongest voice. Just stop buying Monsanto. Just say, is this pesticide treated? Stop buying it. I guarantee if we can get the 99%, the Occupy movement folks doing that, right? Stop buying pesticide-treated food, then we're going to see significant change, right? Number four, launch a proactive initiative. Now, understand there's 20,000 plus solitary bees, okay? Species, that is, not, kinds of bees. These bees are small. You can grab them. I've got videos I can share. Now, to be honest with you, less than a month ago, I didn't know they existed. I thought there was only honeybees, and I thought they all stung the shit out of you, right? No, they don't, right? Solitary bees are amazing. They're fun. You can set up habitats. There's a lot of stuff that you can do. You can watch my videos. Just Google solitary bee habitat. If you can handle a drill and screw some, just screw into wood, you can create a habitat, right? So let's start helping those indigenous bees. Create bee gardens and other things. Launch cheap crowdfunding initiatives. That basically distribute information. The initiative should not be more than $500, okay? And what we need to do, and I'm working on getting some foundations to support and seed these initiatives with $100 or $200 to help them going, because I've done some talks on that. Over 95% crowdfunding fails. We need to get at least a base. Now, if we build this, we work together, we can fix this very quickly, as Coney 12 showed us. Thanks. My name is Michael Trout. Thanks for listening.